What does it take to break through as a comedian and then pivot into a provocative voice in media and politics? We'll explore the answer to that question and beyond during this episode of the Career Journey podcast, No Wrong Choices. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Larry Samuel, soon to be joined by my collaborators Larry Shea and Tushar Saxena. But before we kick off, I have a request. If you enjoy what you're about to hear, please be sure to like and follow our show on your favorite podcast platform and to connect with us on social media. Your support enables us to keep bringing these great journey stories to life. Now let's get started. This episode features the podcaster, comedian, speaker, and news commentator Pete Dominick, who among many other things is the host and creator of the podcast Stand Up. Larry Shea is a former colleague of Pete's at SiriusXM. You are certainly the right person to set up this conversation this time around. So please lead us in.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I got to know Pete over at SiriusXM. He had a great show over there. I used to listen to it. It was great. It was funny. It was interesting. It was smart. And that's kind of what I always thought about Pete, too. You know, I always used to enjoy bumping into him. We'd always have great conversations. I knew he was very talented and very good at what he does. But honestly, I don't know his whole story. So I'm excited to explore his journey and kind of hear it for the first time like the rest of us, right? So really excited to share Pete Dominick with everybody because this is a guy you probably have seen on your TV, you know, on Bill Maher or on, you know, CNN or one of these other places. You know, he's a funny talking head and a really cool dude and a smart guy. So here we go.
I'm kind of like you, Shay, is that, you know, we are both former, I am a former Sirius employee, unlike yourself. You're still there. But I ran into Pete, basically near the tail end of when I was at Sirius. But I remember Pete being a worker. That's what I really remember. He was a hard worker, and he was there like in the real heyday, the first few years of the comedy channels, and he was setting things up and putting shows together. But one thing you could always tell about Pete was that he was a hard worker. He understood what it took to put a good show together, and he really kind of was able to couple that into what he's doing today. And you know, He's always been one of these guys that I've kind of admired from afar because I've never really had a chance to get to know him all that well. But I'll tell you what, now we got a chance to know him a little bit better.
Absolutely. And, you know, I love your comment about learning how to put shows together because he's put together a very good one called Stand Up. So with that, here is Pete Dominick. Pete, thank you so much for joining us.
Gentlemen, a real honor to be here. I really mean that. I'm very much been looking forward to this, and I'm excited to talk to all of you. And Larry and I go back and always had a thing, just like you're one of the good ones. Yeah. Okay.
Great hallway conversations is what we're.
That's basically how we put it too. Yeah, he's one of the good ones. Yeah, sure.
There's a general, you know, when you work when you're in a workplace and you don't necessarily work directly with someone the way Larry and I didn't know, you know, we didn't work directly with each other, but you have a feeling for people and you build a certain kind of trust, and that's important. You need that at work. Sure. And, you know, I think Larry and I always had kind of we're on the same level, on the same plane and had a.
Definitely.
Yeah. I don't know how to explain it. I think Larry knows, and that's all that matters.
It's a symbiotic relationship, no doubt.
Yeah. Yep.
And we certainly feel similarly, which is why 20 years later, we're all doing a podcast together. So you, Pete, you have very good instincts.
Love it.
So leading in, we always like to ask our guests to introduce themselves. I can run through an opening and I can put together a list of things to describe you, but nobody can describe you better than you. So Pete, try to just give us a feel for who you are and what you do.
Well, I grew up in upstate New York in the 80s and 90s. When I was 14 years old, my dad said to me, son, just whatever you do for work, whatever you do, just find something that you enjoy. Because, you know, I make good money. I'm my own boss, but this is selling insurance is not something I love. I want you and your brother to do something that you really like. And I was like, all right, well, the only thing I really like doing and the thing I feel like I'm any good at is making people laugh. Because I was class clown, never missed a day of school because it was an audience and I was good. Even the teachers liked me. And I said, well, can I do comedy for like a living? He's like, yeah, sure. And then he immediately supported that dream. He brought me to the Civic Center to see George Carlin.
Wow.
He brought me to a local comedy to meet a comedian who one day I later became friends with. And from that point on, when I was 14 years old, I decided I wanted to be a stand-up comedian. And I went to college for 2 years, left college, moved to New York City, started pursuing my career in stand-up. It's hard. It was slow, like it is for pretty much everybody but John Mulaney. And son of a bitch. Rich kid goes to Georgetown and does amazing right away. I hate people like that. And can't knock him. But I made it. I made it as a comedian in the hardest place to make it in New York City. I was working at every comedy club. I was passed at every comedy club. Everybody knew me. I knew everybody. And I got hired at Sirius on the comedy channels as a result of kind of my network and, my ability to host a show. I was an MC and host. That's what I got known for, I should say. I wasn't some prolific writer, a Jim Gaffigan or a Todd Barry or any number of these amazing, hilarious comedians, Ted Alexandro. But I was a good MC. I was good in the moment. I got hired as an audience warm-up comedian by Jon Stewart at The Daily Show. And then I got the job at the Colbert Report when that show started. And then I'm still doing that gig at Last Week Tonight on with John Oliver on HBO. And between that and Sirius, I, was making great money, loving what I was doing. And it just blew up from there because that's when I found out. And after about 2 years on the comedy channels at Sirius XM, I heard they were launching an independent political channel. And I was like, that's where I want to be. I want to host a show on that, like some free thinking, independent, nonpartisan, just let's talk to smart people and have smart conversations.
Right.
And, they're looking for the left's Joe Rogan now. It's me. It was me then. It's been me then since. He was a guest on my show. I've been a guest on his show. But the bottom line is, Joe's show is having thoughtful conversations with smart people. It's now entered into the absurd, in my opinion, a lot of conspiracy theories, but it wasn't always that way. And so I did that. But my idea was and Sirius, I basically auditioned, I pitched a show, and they hired me from 1 hour every day, hosting a live show, getting paid $75 a day.
I remember those days.
Which was,
I have memories of those days myself.
Because I was, it was a daily gig on live radio, on satellite radio. And I got to interview every comedian. I already knew most guys, at least if they were New Yorkers, I knew them all. But I didn't know a lot of the guys that were touring or a lot of the LA guys or even the British international comics. I got to meet everybody. I get to interview every single comedian, not because of me, because of the platform, right? Like I was the host, like the local radio host gets to meet everybody. So I was in the building, and I'm a really persistent, determined guy. I went up and I pitched the show, and I went from $75 a day to $60,000 a year, full salary, benefits. $60,000 was an insult. I knew what guys doing 3 hours of radio got.
Right.
It was 300. Not 60. But for me, a comedian who now had one child, I mean, healthcare was still didn't matter. A 401k, where do we sign? And that just blew up. It turned into CNN, and it turned into, I was there for 12 years hosting that show, and I fulfilled all my dreams by the age of 42. Everything I ever wanted to do, I did it all in comedy and in political media, and that's my intro.
That's awesome. And of course, our paths crossed at Sirius. That's when we would have our amazing hallway conversations and admiration from afar, so to speak. So let's start digging into exactly how you built this. We're going to start from the beginning. You already said you grew up in Syracuse and you were the class clown. I mean, I always ask comedians that, right? Like, were you always confident in the class clown? And I read that you also read the morning announcements on the loudspeaker and things of that nature, right? MC talent shows.
We used to make up in the morning announcements. We would make up things that were happening after school. Like today after school at 3:30, there's a basket weaving club meeting.
Love it.
That's when I learned the power of the microphone. But yeah, I was involved in everything in high school and everything. And I played varsity lacrosse and soccer. I'd go from lacrosse practice where I didn't play. I didn't get off the bench and work that out in therapy years later. But I would go from lacrosse practice to play rehearsal and morning announcements. And yeah, my first comedy I ever did was at the talent show. I was like, well, I want to be in the talent show because I want to be in front of an audience. And I didn't have like a stand-up routine, but I did my impression of Dana Carvey's impressions of George W. Bush, Ross Perot, and Bill Clinton. And I killed. And that was that because, it was a small high school, small town, 500 kids in total high school, but every one of them was in the theater laughing at me. And that was all it took. Still could not get laid. But that's I was so little. I
You
was
were
so
practicing.
little. The girls loved me. I was good friends with girls. I was the safe one. But they dated all my friends, and that's because the reason I was a comedian and the reason I didn't end up, I think, getting girls wasn't. I was tiny. I was the littlest guy in high school. Even when I was a senior, I was one of the smallest kids, and that was why I used and found humor. It's the reason my dad did too. My dad is hilarious, and I realized that when I was very young, I was like 5 or 6 years old. I realized that I could, when kids made fun of me for being small, I could come back with a quick-witted comment. If it was good enough, they wouldn't make fun of me again. Sometimes they'd punch me. So I got hit a few times, but like more likely the big kid became my friend and I became that cartoon puppy, like the little puppy next to the giant pup. And I was
They wanted a mouthpiece, probably.
Right. Yep.
So
Yep.
so
That's
I
it.
mean, so you said your father took you to see Carlin when you were young. So who were some of your comedy heroes or influences?
Well, certainly Carlin. Carlin was like what, I went to Catholic church growing up, but my dad clearly never believed it. My mom wasn't Catholic, but kind of did it because they were Italian and for my grandmother kind of thing. But I found George Carlin like audio tapes like in my dad's dresser near the Playboys. And I listened to them like they were like I was looking at Playboys.
Right.
Like it was forbidden. And what he was saying about religion was like, yeah, of course. Of course. Like, thank you for voicing what I always thought growing up in this church. And that was the beginning of it. But, I loved so many other kinds of comedians in different styles. And Dana Carvey and Robin Williams were huge influences on me because Robin could make something out of nothing any moment. And Dana, I loved his impressions. And that was something I was pretty good at. But I was good at doing his impressions. Yeah, I was the best impressionist in my high school. I wasn't the funniest kid. A lot of my friends were funnier than I was, that's for sure. But that's who I chose to hang out with, the funniest kids. You gravitate towards people with humor or similar humor or new humor. That's when I went to college. I hung out with all black guys because black humor was something I was completely unfamiliar with. And it was amazing what happened there with them. That culturally, it was just like you either live or die. And I wanted to live. And they taught me so much. So I think more than anything else, like that experience in high school with my friends, my brother is hilarious, and people that you've never heard of that really impressed upon me different kinds of humor. Like I learned all of them by the time I was, in my early 20s. I could see anybody's humor coming, all the styles, and I could sell it too, which made me marketable as a comedian. Put me in front of any audience, black people, old people, young people, college kids, put me anywhere, anytime.
Did you collect comedy albums like you would rock and roll albums? Because I mean, when I was growing up, obviously I have a whole bunch of music albums, but I also had like a good collection of I had Eddie Murphy Raw, I had Robin Williams, I had.
So sure, there's nothing nerdy about me. Like there's nothing like I never collected like music albums or comedy albums or sports things. Like I am not. I was never that guy. I can't quote things. I didn't study them for hours or listen to them for hours. I just I was a butterfly, and I just whatever was new, whatever people would put in front of me. I was a little lazy in trying to find new things. I just kind of was like whatever my brother served me up, I kind of ate up. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but that like I said, yeah, most people are connoisseurs of any genre of art.
Yeah,
they do that.
That's what I'm asking.
They own all the album and they study them and they think about them. And I don't know. I think I couldn't stay focused long enough or something, or didn't have an appreciation enough for it. Music is my cultural blind spot. Like I can talk about all the arts and almost any other issue, but I'll never engage with someone about music. I'll listen to them, but I have nothing to offer you. Nothing. It can make you dumber.
When did you start to play out? You're doing your high schools, you're doing your talent shows, et cetera, but eventually you took that leap and came up with the courage and the balls to go for it. Tell us about that first experience.
I think the courage and the balls was to move to New York City and to go, I'm going to just walk into a comedy club and become a comedian, because I did the talent shows in high school and then I did talent shows in college, like 2 or 3, and I did like an open mic in college as well. So maybe I was on 6 times on stage doing kind of stand up. And then I moved to New York City to go to acting school. Ostensibly, I never really wanted to be an actor, but I was like, I should get in it. I should continue my education. And that was stupid. I don't think people should study acting or not. They shouldn't pay money for it. And So I walked into a comedy club. I walked into Stand Up New York on July 5th, 1995.
And how did that?
Wow.
Yeah, like what was that?
What did you
like? I mean,
prepare?
did you
Like
just
what?
nerves, anxiety, anything?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But I'm going to do it again
Like
and again and again.
I wanted it more than I know anybody wants anything. You know, you hear these biopics, usually of athletes, because those are easy to kind of narrate because you just see this kid out running every day, out shooting every day, baskets or whatever it is. But I didn't drink. I didn't really chase girls. I mean, I did, but I just wasn't really. I didn't do well, so I just was like friends with people. I loved everybody. It just wasn't a primary pursuit of mine as it was most of my young male friends. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, I didn't have a drink till I was 22. My brother was in rehab, and I was like 14, so that like was really impressed upon me. But I didn't drink because I thought anything and any distraction, women and drinking and drugs would take away from my laser focus on being successful as a comedian. And it was my understanding that the only way to be successful as a comedian, at least for me, was to work really hard. I always had to work really hard to be good at anything and practice and do it again and again. And when you start out in comedy still, but especially then, the only way to get on stage was to bring your friends to see you. And then they put you on stage, they made money. And it's a really insidious practice. Nothing you can really do about it, but it means you have to keep getting new people to come see you. And I mean, you literally, your friends stop returning your messages because they don't want to. Like, I saw you, it's expensive. I supported you. I came to your show. I came twice. You did the same exact material. Not only am I not coming again, I'm not taking your calls anymore because I'm afraid you have to come to your show. And I don't want to, I like you, but I don't want to do that anymore. No offense. Why don't you come to my show? Well, because you don't have a show. Yeah. But I outsmarted that process by getting a job at the front desk of a gym, a high-end gym on the Upper West Side of New York, Equinox. It first started. And what I did was I made new friends every day, and I made people laugh at the front desk. And when I got comfortable with them after the third or fourth time talking to them, I'd say, "Come see a show." So I basically had this whole like farm team of audience members that liked me so much, and they were wealthy because they lived in that neighborhood. Paid for so I just kept generating money and audience for that one comedy club, and I did it as well at other comedy clubs. I did all those bringer shows, but then at a certain point, you get good. And I got so good that they just put me on, especially in that MC role. Like nobody could open a show and get the audience comfortable and happy and then bring it back if need be, or just know to bring the next person up. And that became what I was known for in the late 90s and early aughts. In 2001, September 2001, just before 9/11, I got this great gig where, because of Giuliani at the time, the mayor, this new law to crack down on porn and strip clubs, you had to take your strip club in this case and make like 60% of it had to be any other business. And only 40% of the physical space could be the strip club. So strip clubs were perfect to do comedy. Sure, in the stage, absolutely. The seating, the thrust stage is great for comedy.
Yeah.
And it's a little high, but still, it was fine. So they literally, guys, built a curtain down the middle of the strip club and made it a comedy club, hired me to be the house MC, paid me because they had money, because it was a strip club. They had tons of money. They paid me like $200 a show. Everybody else paid 75 or 100. And I got that gig. I was going to be the house MC for this new comedy club, $200 a show, 3-4 shows a week, maybe more.
Wow.
Because they just had to. And then terrorists attacked 9/11, New York City, and like comedy broke down for a while, but we bounced back, and I did get that job eventually. And then it was just, for me, it just kept getting better. I got a college agent. I made really good money touring the country. I performed at almost every state in the country and over 400 colleges and universities, and never assaulted one student.
Right? Yeah. And you just talked about that laser focus. You could really tell. Before we get into your incredible successes, though, I have to ask, I mean, what is it like to stand on that stage and know that you're bombing? Like, just no trapdoor, no way out. What does that feel like? What do you do? How do you experience that? Because every great comedian who's going to listen to this podcast and want to follow in your shoes, they're going to bomb, and they have to live with it, right?
There's bombing and there's bombing in front of a black audience. So let's just separate the two.
Okay.
And I bombed in front of a black audience at Buffalo State University in front of my then girlfriend I was in love with. We just started dating. It was one of the third show she ever saw me do. There's all these like young black kids from New York City. And I had nothing for them. Even though I spent a lot of time around black guys. Like I had like the first 3 minutes, but once one of them heckled me, it threw me. And I just ate it so bad that I punched a hole in the wall backstage. And it was just so embarrassing because it was in front of that was the worst bomb of my life. I remember another bomb. I don't remember it. I blocked it out, but I do remember like I was waiting for the C train and I was like, let me just jump in front of this train and get it over. I mean, I felt like I was like, it's the easiest way. But mostly I didn't bomb because I was so quick on my feet that I was able to get out of any situation, go into the audience, go into the moment, be real about the moment. So I would always survive. I'd always find a way to survive, but I don't want to act as if I didn't bomb. And I mentioned the two worst, but generally speaking, I didn't because I know what to do in the moment. I can abandon all preparation. I've always got 90 minutes or not 90, but an hour, half an hour prepared.
Yeah.
And at this point, I've been doing it so long, I've got a joke for every single situation. But I really do prefer the real moments and the crowd work. That was always my bread and butter, and I love it.
Do you remember the first time you killed and really felt like you were breaking through and taking the next step?
The first time I ever walked on stage, that high school.
I was going to say, outside of high school.
And yeah, I mean, I don't know the first time. It became a thing for me. I did really, really well for a long time in small rooms filled with people. Forget about it. We're on fire. I set them on fire. And anybody that knows me then, and I know all the people who did it too, Lisa Lampanelli and Jessica Curson and Strat Small. And like, there was so many crowd pleasers. I was a crowd pleaser, man. I would light them up. I just wanted people to have a good time. And so that was like, when you say, do I remember the first time? I would say, yeah, 1999 to 2010, I killed.
Wow.
There you go.
Do you prefer working a small, more intimate room, or do you like a larger venue?
No, I prefer a small room for sure. Even comedians who sell out arenas generally still love to be in the small rooms because of the intimacy of it all and the way that
Chappelle keeps talking about that a lot. He enjoys working small.
Chappelle was always at the clubs when I was coming up. I mean, every comic knows him because he would come in all the time because he loved being in the small rooms. The biggest audience I ever performed in front of was 6,000 people at Universal Amphitheater in Los Angeles, opening for Artie Lang. Opened for him for years. And
wow.
It's my greatest story too, I think, in comedy. Probably is my greatest on-stage triumph, at least, because when you opened for Artie, I was warned, and I had opened for him, I don't know, 10 times before then. But the audience was Howard Stern audiences. They were monsters.
Sure.
They were the worst of us.
For sure.
At least in terms of like, they wanted to make fun of you. Like they were there. So I was told, like, no one can open for Artie successfully because when you walk out, they start booing you. That's the bit. Imagine walking to the microphone, you're already getting booed. The first time I ever opened for him, that's exactly what happened. But I attacked people in the crowd, like viscerally, worse than they could, and just one after another. And then I eventually won him over. But I was there in LA, 6,000 people. And Artie was always generous with everybody. He gave a lot, and he let this band open for him. And they would have been great if they played one song, but they played like 5 songs, and they were pretty hard, like core. And it just wasn't. It wore the audience down. It was too long. Right. It was too hard for 30 minutes, and the audience was like booing them to get off. And they stayed way too long. And now you hear the announcer, 7,000 people in an arena. Ladies and gentlemen, your host this evening, Pete Dominick.
That must have been worse.
They're already angry.
I was so mad at that audience, at that band, that they just took it out of me. Who is this guy? Nobody knew. Of course.
Oh my God.
And even Ryan Phillippe booed me, and he was just backstage hanging out with us. Like,
Ryan Phillippe. He seems like a really nice guy too.
I'm joking. He was. But that night there were so many celebrities backstage. It was hilarious. And so they're booing me, and I had no plan, but my career is such that my brain thinks very quick. I get out of a situation. It's back to that little boy. Get out of this. Find your way out. And then something pops in. And what I said, I go, I'll make a deal with everybody booing me. You give me one joke, one moment. If it works, I stay. If it doesn't, I'll leave and bring on Artie Lang, even though there's like 4 other openers still waiting. And the joke was, and I knew the audience, and I go, let me just tell you, it's crazy here right now. We're in LA, backstage is the Artie Lang show. In backstage, it's all celebrities, tons of celebrities packed in this little room. So I'm saying to the audience. And I go, and I was so packed, I like bumped into this guy really hard and I turned around and guess who it was? Now I have the audience listening because they want to know who this celebrity is. I go, it was Ron Jeremy, famous porn star. And they're laughing, starting to laugh. And I go, I didn't know what to say to him. It's Ron Jeremy. So I just blew him. Not a joke I would do like in my act. Like I met Ron Jeremy, didn't know what to do, blew him. But it was like, I knew the Howard Stern audience would love that lowbrow, homoerotic joke kind of thing. And I got him. And Artie, and I won him over. And I did another, 5 minutes and introduced, and I turned around an audience of miserable people and made them happy. And Artie went on Howard and he goes, I just got to tell you a story. Shout out to Pete Dominick, did the most unbelievable thing I've ever seen in comedy. Like took an audience of 7,000 people booing him. And he like turned it around in one joke. It's like nothing I've ever seen. And thank you. Cause those people were pissed. And by the time I got out there, everybody was happy.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Love it. Let's back up a touch. How'd you get the agent? How did you get the agent to do the college tour?
It's a good story because I asked another comedian if he would make the recommendation, and he did. And, comedians don't do that. Comedians don't do that. They're very competitive. They don't go quite that far. I shouldn't say they don't do. There's a lot of guys that do. But his name is Steve Byrne, and he's still a friend. And he's just always a good guy. He did not compete with you, or he was very confident in his abilities and who he was, I think. And so he recommended the agent, and she signed me. And, I literally his recommendation put me in direct competition with him to go after the same pie. And he never thought twice of it. And years later, he's such a good guy. Years later, the night my daughter was born, so that would be January 21st, 2005, it was a blizzard. And my daughter was born at 7:30, but I wasn't making great money. And I wasn't even that serious yet. And so I was doing sets that night. The night my daughter was born, I had to go out and get the $75, $50, whatever it was. Right. So I go out and I do a set, and I see Steve Byrne, and he knows my then girlfriend. And he says, how's Val doing? I go, I just became a dad. He goes, what? I go, tonight, my daughter was born. He's like, what? So we walk out of the comedy club, and he walks into a deli, and he says, wait for me out here. Wait for me 1 second. I just got to run and get some gum. And he came out with a bouquet of flowers. He said, you're going back to the hospital. Bring these to Val. And he's just a kind of guy that role model that behavior. And I've always tried to be that guy. I take those types of behaviors. I steal them. I eat them right up and replicate them. And I think that's what we're supposed to do. And I've tried to do that. I never had the opportunity to, buy flowers for somebody who just had a baby, I suppose. But, in terms of not competing that serious, I prided myself on bringing people in and platforming them. And I started a lot of people. Dino Badala, John Fugelsang, and Laura Coates will all tell you they have shows because of me. And nothing could make me more proud than that. And I think that's, we should all be doing that for each other all the time as humans.
Absolutely. I actually just saw you with Laura Coates last night, I believe, which was a really great hit talking
I'm going to
about
be back
Jaguar.
on there tonight with her. Yeah.
Oh, will you really?
Yeah.
It was great.
Thanks.
So talk to us a little bit about John Oliver and getting into that world with Oliver and Colbert. How did you break into that? And tell us about that experience.
Well, the audience warm-up job is really hard. It's a hard thing to do, and it's coveted because it's amazing money. And you can stay in New York City and not go on the road. And every comedian it gets to a point where if they could just work the comedy clubs in New York, they would, and just go out at, once a month or something. But but you really can't pay your rent, much less make enough money. But if you get one of those warm-up jobs,
Right.
they pay a lot. And I knew I was good at it. And somebody who worked on a TV show was like, there's this new show doing a pilot, and you should, I was already a pretty successful comic. Like, you should go. I didn't need any experience, is what I'm trying to say. And the show is called Craft Corner Death Match. And they bought 25 episodes. And so I did 25 episodes where the audience was paid audience or like homeless people. And I had to go up and try to make them. And then I had to keep going up. It was torture. It was the worst gig I ever had, but it made me really strong. And then I auditioned along with a bunch of other comedians, guys whose names I won't say, but because everybody wanted that warm-up gig. But I was better at that. They were better at a lot of things than I was, but I was better at that than them. And Jon Stewart hired me. And then Stephen Colbert spun off, and he took me with him. And and Jon brought back in the guy who used to do it. And those were some of the best years of my life. Some nights I warmed up the audience at the Daily Show and then ran over to the Colbert Report because they taped just after. And I double dipped and got two, payouts. And importantly, those were the best audiences in the world. Like, to see if you get the audience at the Daily Show, or the Colbert Report, or now John Oliver is the best audience. In addition to those shows, they're the smartest, edgiest, most diverse, young, often audience. And so to have that gig at that show was amazing. You didn't let it go. And the only reason I eventually left Colbert is because I got hired at CNN to be on an on-air correspondent. And at that point, I was working at Sirius XM, Colbert, which is Comedy Central, and CNN. So I was literally employed by 3 separate networks.
Triple dip.
That was as good as it gets in terms of money, but my daughters were little, and I realized what was good, and I actually ended up trying to pare things down, believe it or not.
What year was that? What year are we talking about?
2010, I got hired at CNN, and I was an on-air correspondent there. And then that was the kind of beginning of my like on-air cable commentator thing.
Did you do Man in the Street there too? Wasn't that part of it?
Called Pete on the Street.
Pete on the Street. Yeah.
And I went out and I had a question of the day, and I went out in the streets of New York, and several other, they sent me on a couple of remotes. It was on a field at Fenway Park, and I covered the oil spill down in New Orleans and a bunch of other assignments. And it was great. And I got myself in there, and eventually I actually hosted a show on CNN for 8 weeks. My own show. I hosted a cable news show for 8 weeks called What the Week with Pete Dominick. And so, yeah, I mean, I really did it all. I did all of it. You name it. I did it, and it was all great. And now I'm doing the independent media thing. And it's a whole nother world in so many ways, but everything's changed so much over our careers too. We all know.
I want to take it back just a little bit and ask, obviously, when you were doing your road stuff, when you're doing clubs, when you're doing colleges, there's a bit of time in there from probably when you were doing all that to when you got the warm-up gig with Stewart's show, with the Daily Show, with the Rapport, with then obviously John Oliver. How much time are we talking about in terms of there, and how much did it help to hone your chops to get a job like that?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. I mean, years. There were years before I got Colbert. I think that was like 2008. So before that, I mean, I was on the road I was doing just stand-up for a solid 8 years, and I was doing colleges. So that's one type of performance in the middle of nowhere, Wisconsin, with 20 kids in a cafe, the snack shop, or if you're lucky, they really do a good job promoting, and people love the comedians they bring. It's 300 kids in the auditorium. But I did that all over the country. And I also performed, I got to, open for a lot of guys, but then I made it to be a headliner at a lot of good clubs. So I headlined weekends at comedy clubs around the country. And always, though, my main focus was New York City, the clubs in New York City. And I was out, you felt guilty like I said, I worked really hard. So I worked as many days as I could. I didn't take time off unless I couldn't get a spot. I tried to get as many shows as I could, as many sets as I could every night. And I felt guilty if I didn't work. And I felt really guilty if I didn't work on a Friday or Saturday. And I did every type of gig in front of every type of audience: corporate, fundraiser, chicken barbecue, family gathering, bar mitzvah in some kid's house. I mean, wildly inappropriate venues and events for comedy. You should never have comedy. Noon at a college, You just walk out and like, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I know you're trying to eat. You name it. I was in every situation. I mean, we did everything during the pandemic. You know, I performed in parking lots in front of people in their cars, and that's also like kind of what broke me too. From that, it didn't break me. I was just like, I don't want to do this shit. This is nonsense. We're really fortunate, and I'm really fortunate. And now like so much has changed. We could talk about that. You know, if we even get to it, I don't even care that much about the comedy scene today, and a lot of people are doing really well, but so much has changed with the internet and the cultural zeitgeist changing and
Sure,
people
absolutely.
across the spectrum. People like to say how sensitive liberals are. It's a ridiculous conversation because Trumpers and right wing, everybody's sensitive. If you say something they don't like, everybody just gets upset and yells at you.
Everyone clutches pearls,
Yeah,
man.
nobody's
Everyone
better
clutches
than
pearls.
anybody else. Like, and if you're just trying to do comedy and you really the aim is comedy, then I hope that you can enjoy that. But it's not necessarily the case anymore. But so I did everything to answer your question that I possibly could. I put myself in every situation that a comedian could ever imagine being in, and you sink or swim.
What did you learn from guys like Jon Stewart, John Oliver, and those guys?
Not a lot. I think I learned more from guys I was with every night that I watched work and develop. I mean, those guys were really doing scripts, so it wasn't really what I was doing. But I learned about how they carried themselves as the leader of a show or as a man, as a powerful man. I learned a lot about that, and those two guys were role models. They were good role models for other men, and they treated people very well. John treated me better than probably anybody because he was a stand-up comic. And he it's just a really salt of the earth guy. He's a mensch and a great guy. And I learned how important it was to be funny and how hard it was to be funny, including for them. I'm not going to say it never gets easy, but they always worked at it. So I definitely learned their work ethic. Like I had a really strong ethic, but being around those guys doing a show every day, I still do a show every day. It's what I do. I have to do a show today. And I build my own podcast every day with 3 segments, and it's a tremendous amount of work, but that's what I've always done. That's what they do. So I guess work ethic and character more than anything else.
When you finally, or shall I say, what prompted you to want to make the move? As you said, when you were at Sirius, you were doing the stuff over on the comedy channels there. But when independent finally came through with the idea of independent politics, thought, etc., what made you want to make that move into that genre?
Comedy just wasn't satisfying enough to me in terms of like the purpose. It didn't give me enough of a purpose. I was always a very my mom's a public school teacher, and service mattered to me and my family. And it just didn't feel like, it felt like a very selfish thing to do. And I loved it, and I still love it. But after 9/11 and then becoming a father, those 2 events in my life made me care about the world a lot more and care about my daughter's future a lot more. And I wanted to be more impactful in some way and be of service, I think, in some way. And so doing a thoughtful talk show and bringing on the smartest people I could find and asking them good questions was what I thought was the way for me to do it. I was never and am still not the guy who has all the answers or positions himself as the genius behind the microphone telling you how it is. I do bring on people who are very smart about their issue that they have worked their whole career on, et cetera. And so that was what I did. And that was why I did it. 9/11 and becoming a father made me want to do something more important and of service that made more of an impact in the world. I wanted to be more impactful than just, making people laugh and just purely entertaining people. And I wasn't good enough of a joke writer. I could perform. If you wrote the joke, I could sell it to anybody, but I just wasn't good enough of a joke writer to be someone who spoke truth to power. So all my jokes, and still are, about my personal life and kind of just observations. But my humor around politics and social issues wasn't that good. I was never going to be that guy. And frankly, I didn't really like a lot of those comedians. They just were kind of divisive and kind of arrogant. And so it doesn't really, but I was interested in social issues and and the impact of our, our behaviors and our policies and climate change early on, and civil rights. I was raised to be really concerned about civil rights in general. So I wanted to be in that space. And so I made it happen.
Jon Stewart years ago was asked, whether or not he considered himself a political pundit. Now obviously he's always said that he doesn't consider himself that, maybe less so now. The Daily Show for many years was considered one of these places where people look to get news from, right? So, he never thought he was a political pundit or someone who was there to deliver information. Do you consider yourself that?
Well, first of all, that's nonsense.
Yeah, I thought it was crazy for him to say that.
No,
as well.
Him and Steven always said that. Don't pay attention to me. I come on after the puppets. But I didn't connect the dots because you asked questions that normally I would connect these two dots for you. But basically, I created a radio show that was the Daily Show for the radio, because comedians were the only people that would be of any interest to listen to when it came to progressive ideas. There wasn't progressive radio shows that were that interesting. They're boring and weren't good. So you needed performers the way they have on the right. And so comedians were able to do that. So that's the most impact they had on me. So what I learned from them is that you can make an impact on people and teach people about important issues by entertaining them. That's what I learned from them. And that's what I should have told you. But John and Steven and John, I don't think they still would cop to say that kind of bullshit.
I don't think John Oliver would, for sure.
Right, I don't think he would. He knows the impact he's making, but I don't think Jon Stewart would either. I mean, John is an activist. By definition, an activist in terms of what he did for veterans and the 9/11 first responders, healthcare. That was activism and organizing, and he used his influence and his fame and his credibility for that. And so was his show. His show was absolutely as culturally impactful and important as any other program in all of media, from NPR to CBS News, the CNN, or anywhere else. More impactful than all of them, probably, on the people listening or watching them. I mean, young people, overwhelmingly, a young, diverse group of people were raised on those shows. They were deeply impacted by those shows. I was at the rally for Sanity and Fear. I have that in here somewhere, where John and Steven were, hosted that live event in Washington, D.C. in 2010. And at that point, I was working for CNN, and they hired me to cover that event because they knew I had ins there and I had credibility with both Steve and John. So there we were. I was live on TV on CNN with Wolf Blitzer, now working for CNN, just having left the Colbert Report. And Wolf says, "Describe the scene." And I go, "It's a party, man. We're having a great time. It's awesome. It's like a party out here." And I was standing above everybody, and I get everybody to yell. And I was like, "Are we having fun?" And I go, "Back to you, Wolf."
I think I remember that.
Find that audio or video. Is a phrase I never thought I'd say, for real. Back to you, Wolf. And so I get a call. They call Pete. Somebody needs to talk to you in the van, CNN van. We're in a satellite van on location in the mall where we were in DC. And one of the lawyers that I knew him, "Pete, it's Eric. Listen, repeat after me. I'm not part of the event. I'm covering the event." And I am, and I being the way I am, at Sirius, I was the same way. I don't know if you knew this, Larry, but I did not and do not see hierarchy, and I don't respect it. And so the president of the company was Scott Greenstein, and the CEO was what's his name?
Or Mel Karmazin? It was Mel, right?
I had the same relationship with Mel, but it was whoever the guy was after Mel from Indianapolis. Hey, everybody, it's me. Yeah.
The redhead.
Anyway,
I forget his name.
Those guys, I took the piss out of them in the hallway, in their offices. I did not, allow them to have anything on me.
You didn't bend the knee to them.
No, I was an entertainer. Other people had to, but I was an on-air host. I wasn't bending the knee to this guy. Who is he? He doesn't have my talent. Where does his talent lie? I'm not saying he doesn't have talent, but it's nowhere near mine. I succeeded in a place where no one succeeds, and he's just an executive. And honestly, a lot of executives, they just know people and they're likable or whatever. I'm not saying they aren't talented, but there was your talent, your ability to have a conversation, and your ability to steer that conversation isn't as good as mine. So I'm taking over. And early in my career, I didn't do that. And I let a lot of guys kind of take advantage of me. But I realized quickly, I was like, no, that's not how it's going to be. And so when that executive said to me, repeat after me, I got triggered. I was like, oh, you should, dude, no way. I mean, I'm not standing for that. So I just went back right away at him, and I shouldn't have, but I said, you repeat after me. I'm Eric. I'm an executive CNN. I hired a comedian, not a journalist. And he appreciated it. These guys, you talk back to them and you move yourself up sometimes, or they hate you forever. But that never was the case with me, because I had a good point. Like, it was a ridiculous way he was talking to me, and I didn't much care for it. And so I always push back. I don't like powerful men, and I never want to be one. And I've never tried to be one. I try to create a place where people have, when I was at Sirius, I had 3 people that worked on my show, but I was never the boss, never acted like it. The rules were, they could yell at me, they could talk down to me, definitely could make jokes at my expense. That was always encouraged, because I felt like that created a better atmosphere for creativity and for people to be comfortable. And I just don't like that. Who likes that? Who likes to be talked down to, especially when you're a man, especially when you're a white guy? Like, it was just so transparently weak to me. I find it to be weakness.
I think actually it's funny we're talking about this, because I think that's one of your most endearing things, is that you have a toughness and a grit and a take no shit attitude when you're debating people, when you're going, with the smartest people in the world. I mean, you talked about it a minute ago, how you brought the smartest people in the world to engage in a conversation. And I mean, to say you held your own is an understatement of the year. I mean, you were toe to toe with a lot of people on some really important subjects, and you never back down about that. Do you have a favorite? Do you have one interview that stands out in your mind, someone you brought on or you went on a show, some incident or thing that happened where you're like, this is why I do this right here, right now. This is why I do this.
I have a lot of moments. They're in different categories, Larry. Like, I've got them all in my Hall of Fame in my head that I can reference real quick to feel satisfied about what I've accomplished. If I ever have for a moment self-pity, which is one of the more insidious feelings that anybody should ever have, and should you have it, and I've dealt with it a lot in my life, and I find myself having it, I go, well, what are you doing? What are you doing? Especially, like, you have done it all, man. Like, what have you not done and accomplished? Why are you feeling bad for yourself? But so there's a lot of different moments. Interviewing civil rights leader John Lewis was at the Aspen Ideas Festival. And the only reason I was there because I created the partnership between Sirius and Aspen Ideas Institute. I made that happen, which is another thing that made Scott Greenstein look good. And why did I do that? Partially because I knew that he had a house in Aspen. Literally, that's how shrewd I was. But the interviewing him was the moment I got off the bench. I no longer felt like an imposter. Like, I put myself in this location. I booked that person. He said yes because of me and my credibility of where I've gotten. Interviewing John Lewis was the career moment where I was like, okay, this is my hero, and I'm interviewing him. I didn't think I'd ever meet him, and yet I'm hosting a lot. And then we sang, then we danced to Pharrell's Happy, and there's video of that on together. Nice. I danced with him. But I think that the best, like, performance moment for me, I got a lot of bad ones, including my entire appearance on Joe Rogan's show. But the best moment for me was when I was on Real Time with Bill Maher, and Billy Bush was on the panel with us. Billy Bush, of course, of Access Hollywood, who was there on the bus.
Was this after Access Hollywood, I'm assuming?
Yep.
Yeah.
Sure.
It was, he was trying to, it was years later. It was 2 years after that tape came out.
Right.
Because it was 18. Trump had been elected in 16. So Billy Bush is kind of trying to rehab his image.
Yeah,
he took a beating after that tape came out. And
walking it back. Yep.
So I scolded him. And Bill Maher did not like it. And fair enough. Maybe it wasn't appropriate on that show. Who am I? And Bill Maher. And the reason why it's a standout moment is because you can't be prepared for a live TV moment. You can't prep for it. You can never see it coming, especially on a show like that. Like, Bill's really unpredictable, and he's not intimidated by anyone at all, really. And certainly not me. So he said, Pete, you've never, because they call that a locker room talk. People said, that's just locker room talk. I always was like, no, not in any locker rooms I've been in. We didn't joke about raping someone or sexually assaulting someone.
Right.
Sure.
But so I scolded Billy Bush, and you can find it out there better than I can explain it. But basically what happened was, it was a moment where I couldn't predict, and Maher really pushed back on me and put me in a corner hard. He goes, "Oh, Pete, like you've never had locker room talk? Like you're like a perfect guy." And I go, "No, absolutely not. I objectified women my entire life as if they were objects to be conquered. But I matured. I grew up. But I will say this, even when I was younger, in junior high, at my most immature, we didn't joke about sexually assaulting women. We didn't. What we did was this. We said, I want to have sex with Sarah. And my friends would say to me, Sarah will never fuck you. And that was it.
Yep. Yeah.
And it gets a huge laugh, and including by Maher, because I was honest. I didn't try to act like I was better than other guys, but I was a little like, we weren't that bad. And more importantly, that was what we did. You bust chops. I want to hook up with that girl. She'll never hook up with you, loser. That's what guys do a lot of. It's not like, good luck, I hope it works out for you. Let me know about it as I go home and touch myself. So, I mean, that was one of my favorite moments, and I have it, on my reel as such. But there's a million, working at CNN. I never thought I would be in like political media, I suppose, when I started as a comedian. And what that led me to, and who I got to interview, and the spaces I got to be in, and the moments I really got to be around and cover were pretty cool, man. Really cool.
When did you make the break from satellite and go over to do your own thing?
In 2019, in November 2019, they told me they would not be renewing my contract, and that my last show would be, today, basically. And my world came completely unraveled. I built, like, I just grew and built within both the industry and specifically that business. And I did everything right. I got work in TV. I played the game that the executives wanted me to play to get attention for the company. Cause before the merger of the company, and then after the merger, like anytime they got mentioned, it was huge. And I got them mentioned because I was on TV all the time. Scott Greenstein would send me to charity events and I sat with Mel and other people, like, representing the company. I did a great job as an ambassador to the company in every way. And as a result, I was rewarded. I got 5 contracts. I negotiated them myself, and it was great. And I created my own channel at the end. And we did it for about 4 years. It never was what I said it was going to be, which is like the Daily Show of the radio, NPR with a personality. But I did do it. And as a result of me creating that channel, I think I got another 4 years probably. And those last 4 years were the best contracts I had. But the way I look at it, it was an absolute tragedy. And I talk a lot about what happened to me in my life very transparently. I wrote about it. In an article for Katie Couric's media outlet shortly after it happened. And I use it as much as I can, that story, for other men. Because, I mean, the easiest way to say it is, I had my dream job, and I loved every day, and I never took it for granted. And I took a breath before every show, and often during the show, and I can't believe I'm doing this. I can't believe I get to do this. When we come back from break, I was excited. Every moment was so gratified, and I almost never missed a day. Like, I never missed a day of high school. I love the work. And when I lost it, I lost everything: my confidence, my money, my health insurance. I knew it was going to cause relationships with my wife, because why wouldn't it? It's money. My lifestyle changed, everything. And I had to pick up the pieces, and it was absolutely devastating for me. And luckily I had a really great life, and a lot of privilege. But I think that there's a lot of us, people in my category, if you're like me, and things generally worked out, and somewhat free of tragedy, and your career took off, and your dreams all came true, and then you lose it. What happens then is you realize what the word resilience means, and that a lot of people around you have it and you don't. Holy shit. I came undone and spiraled in ways I never did in my life, because I never had that kind of adversity. I had such privilege. And that's why a lot of men in my situation, or even tangentially close to it, get very ill and drink and develop addictions, and often take their lives. And I'm working really hard in that space to prevent that. And I talk a lot about what happened then. But building it back up was the hardest thing I've ever done. And who wants to work that hard that far into your career? you already did it all. Like I did all the hard stuff.
Right.
Now I should just show up, put the microphone on, turn the camera on. Let's go. I earned it.
You earned it.
But
Yeah.
You know what, Pete? Honestly, I can totally relate with what you're saying, since the three of us had a show over at Sirius for many years, and when that show was gone, it was like, it really did rattle you. And and I'm like you, I was let go from Sirius, and yes, it rattled my confidence. It made me not trust myself, my instincts any longer. So yeah, I totally relate to what you're saying. Actually, even before we started actually recording this interview, we talked a little bit about, what that life was like. And then you talked about the notion of being in corporate radio. Now, I don't know if you did a lot of terrestrial radio prior to Sirius, but that to me was my notion of corporate radio. So I wanted to ask you, like, what do you see now, let's say from your days in corporate radio to where you're essentially now you're your own business, right? You're your own business at this point. Sirius was so different in that the radio shows we did there was a great deal of freedom to them. Yes, obviously under a corporate flag, but there was a great deal of freedom to that. Do you feel less shackled, more shackled, even now with what you have to do?
Well, I definitely feel less shackled. It's for me to sink or swim. I mean, I don't work with anyone, and so I make booking decisions and editorial decisions and marketing decisions, and I just changed my whole show after Trump got reelected to do an opening segment that
I heard that the happy opening or the good
called
feeling.
The Good Stuff. I do it every day now.
Yep.
And because I have this practice on my own that I do every day, where I read, write, journal, meditate, and exercise. And basically I read a lot of philosophy, Stoicism, Buddhism, all those books. I've always subscribed to all kinds of different self-help and self-empowerment and betterment stuff. And so I just share all this, different quotes, and I call it The Good Stuff. And it's been really popular because that's what people want. And the point of it is that I could do that. I just decided I'm going to do that. If people like it, great. If they don't, great. But, there are trade-offs, as you guys know. I mean, I talk about it a fair bit with people who are self-employed about anything, whether it's a landscaping or an accounting business, whatever. It's like no paid time off. I used to love my paid time off. I'd take a vacation, relax, knowing I'm getting paid. And if you don't work now, especially in media, you have to be seen. But it's always so precious when people are like, I don't like being on social media. I'm like, well, you got to do it. Podcast, talking to a microphone because you want people to listen to you. And now you're acting like you don't need to promote it because it's annoying. I hear you.
It's the hardest thing. You have to be on all the time.
So you got to be on all the time. You got to be producing things to be seen all the time. So that's hard. That's really hard because I would like to have more time off, but I really do love my work. I really do love the opportunity I get to talk to almost everybody I want. Like one of the cool things in my life is all the books you see behind me, and my whole place is decorated in books. They were all free. I can walk up to my book. I can walk up to my bookcase and I can be like, not only did I read that book, I interviewed that author. I love that. I can walk up to my books and go,
same here.
That author.
Same here.
And I just think that's a really cool thing to be able to get to do for a living. I have my curiosity quenched every day, and I laugh. I have great conversations. I have conversations for a living. That's my job. And so I don't, it's a lot of work. You're always having to work, but I feel really lucky to be that I'm able. When Sirius ended, I was like, well, it's over. I don't know what I'm going to do. I didn't want to go back to just doing stand-up because it just wasn't, like I said earlier, wasn't gratifying enough to me. And it was hard traveling. I didn't want to leave my kids. I never want to leave my kids. When I lost my gig at Sirius, and I sat down with my daughters, who were 14 and 12 at the time, and I told my 14-year-old daughter, I was like, listen, I lost my job. And she knew I was very upset. And she goes, she's so comforting and wise, always. And she put her hand on my shoulder and she's like, I mean, I'm not worried about it. Whatever you do next is going to be better than what you did before. Can I go?
That's some words, boy.
Like, can I go? I was like, yeah. And she just wasn't worried. And my 12-year-old goes, Are you not going to be friends with famous people anymore? What happened to you? What the fuck is wrong with you? And then she goes, Are we going to be poor now? I go, get out. Who made you? No, I mean, but those were her concerns. But those, it was a huge, huge shock and game changer. But I guess enough people, because of Sirius, I had built enough of an audience that I immediately started making pretty good money. and having a lot of listeners because of what Sirius gave me. And I've been able to grow it. I can't believe it, but I've been able to grow it slowly but surely. I haven't lost, and that's the only thing. So be able to monetize a podcast is unbelievable. To be able to make the kind of money I'm making is really unbelievable, and to be able to grow it even slowly, given the things that have happened in the world and the way I've done it. But the coolest thing is I never ever expected in my whole career and entirely at Sirius that whole time to build a community. I've now built a community, and lots of people are doing this. Like lots of hosts, podcast shows have an actual community, but I'll put mine against anybody because we're real. We meet. I host a Zoom hangout every Thursday night. Now I'm doing it twice a week for the indefinitely because people are all scared and broken after the election, at least my audience is. And so it's amazing. I have become friends with these people. I have hundreds of real life friends, more friends than anybody I know as a result of this. I've always had a lot of friends, but and really like high quality people, diverse group of people, and just very deep, thoughtful, curious, kind, generous, very funny. Your audience often reflects you in some ways, but it's not a bunch of dudes, and it's not there's a lot of different people, and to build this community, and people really need community, and there's nothing wrong with and everything right with monetizing community building. It's a really moral thing to do, especially now. People feel connected and not alone. You're potentially saving lives, but you're certainly enriching lives. And you can do this now. Sure. A lot of people are doing it. And I'm like the perfect person and type of person to do it. I don't have boundaries, and I don't, think I'm better than anybody. And I'm funny, so I can do these live hangouts and be entertaining during them. And it's just, you guys should come check it out. It's magical.
I was gonna ask. I want to check one out.
Well, I'll give you a link for the next one. I mean, we have talented people that are also we have a musician named John Carroll, who is one of you guys all know music. He was one of the founding members of Starland Vocal Band, and he's an Emmy Award-winning singer-songwriter, Grammy Awards, forgive me. And he wrote the theme song to my show, and he writes music, and he performed for us live. And he's like a real cool cat, like a real cool guy. And so we've got a lot of talented people that offer all kinds of different things to the community in different ways. It's amazing.
Such an insightful conversation. It is hard to look at those moments when things kind of fall apart. And I need to ask, you mentioned your family a couple of times. Work-life balance wise, I mean, losing the gig at Sirius might have been a true blessing in that sense as well, right? You're home, you get to spend more time with them. How did that work out? Was it a blessing in that way?
Yes and no. It's a great question. But I talked a lot about work-life balance when I was on the radio, and I had it then, because what I did was I told my agents and managers, I don't want any work. If speaking engagements only and one night gigs only, but I don't want to pitch shows or do pilots or anything, because I had a real boundary on work life. And I had my dream job. It was a lot of work. I put in 8 hours a day. I prepared more for my radio show than anybody at Sirius, without a doubt. I mean, I came in there at 5:30 a.m. every single day for years, only person in the building. That's how I was when I was little. I've always been that way because I'm not talented enough. So I have to work harder, to put in more hours. And so I had this really great work-life balance for my daughter's whole lives up until they're 12 and 14. And I was very serious about that. I was very principled about not working too much. And I was very present. I never missed anything important, almost nothing of my girls. And when I lost it, I had to work like crazy. Luckily, the girls were older and more independent and had their own lives. Yeah, sure. So it was a good time for me to have less time for them because less time was needed. I mean, even if I had the time, they weren't spending it with me because they're teenagers. They're with their friends. They have a lot of friends. And so I lost a lot of that, but I absolutely missed like mornings for years with them because I hosted a show in the morning. I never saw them before school. Now I drove them to school every day. So absolutely, I had more time with them, but they were older then. So I think you see what I'm saying. So I had less of a work-life balance, and now I have very little work-life balance, but I don't need it. Like all I do is work, and I love my work, and then I exercise, and I'm pretty happy right now with that. And I have a real purpose too, a real sense of purpose with my work post this election. I'm really doing well by creating and curating this community of folks that we can stay connected in a really terrifying time for a lot of people.
All right, I want to talk a little bit about the election, or at least now post-election. And one of the topics that's been kind of bandied about is the notion of the Harris campaign.
Has it been bandied about?
Yeah.
Wait a second. I did not come on this show.
You don't want to bandy? You don't want to bandying? But one of these things that's been kind of thrown around is that, Harris did not do broadcasts. And my question to you is, and I know that there's a negative connotation when you say that word, but do you consider yourself a broadcast on the left?
No way. No way. I would the idea of it,
because you said you're the left Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
Joe Rogan is a broadcast.
Right. Well, that's a good point. Yeah, you've got me. I think what I mean by that is, and what people mean by that is, a host that presents a different style of masculinity, of manhood.
Right.
And when you are like I am, my style, my views, my way I carry myself, you tend to attract a lot of women. So yes, I attract men, but I attract a lot of women too. And because they're all looking for a guy who's just not an arrogant, sexist prick. And there's a place for all those guys. There always will be. So, but I think the answer, I'm still stuck on your question, but did Kamala, should she have done? I mean, I firmly believe that.
My question is not so much should she have done broadcast, but it's more the notion of, would you consider yourself that in that genre, which you have said you do not, but is there space, and is there necessary space for that kind of broadcasting?
And different ideas from what's become, the
there is. And I mean, I
expectation.
think that if you marketed towards men and you talked about issues that men are more primarily interested in, you can do that. And there are a lot of guys that present a different type of manhood that do sports, that do, I don't know, I can't name one that does, mixed martial arts or any of those things. But the idea is to present a different version of masculinity, period. And we can talk about what that is, than the one that the broadcasts do. And this idea that you have to identify as a certain type of traditional masculinity, or you aren't cool, you aren't a man, you aren't
a man.
Yeah,
right.
People that think the way I think, I would say we just find it's lazy and boring. I mean, it makes no it has no appeal to me. And then at the same time, I joke about it all the time. Like, oh man, you're such a man. You can fix things, and you're good around the house, and you're so tough, and whatever. But I mean, I joke. I do gender stereotypes kinds of as jokes, and I'm happy to applaud any traditional kind of masculine roles that you have. But this, the idea of, the way I say it, the difference is 2 Navy SEALs come back from Afghanistan having served 6 deployments and seen a lot of bad shit and lost guys, and they suffer with PTSD and moral injury and potentially physical injury. The difference between the one that goes to therapy and confronts his demons and the one that doesn't is how I measure strength. Because the hardest thing to do is to confront your demons, your childhood trauma, what happened in your career, in your marriage, your whatever's happening. Really terrifying. It's more terrifying than jumping out of a plane or doing stand-up comedy or any number of things. To confront the worst moments in your life, or relationships that you had, or experiences that you had that paint you today, that affect you today. To me, that's strength. And so is pain. Like, how much pain you can take is another measure of strength. And so I always kind of do this trick with people. And I say, most men can move more weight, can lift more weight, or physically stronger, if you measure strength that way, than women. But women can take more pain because they give birth. Like, how do you measure strength? Like, how do you measure it? Because, we get the flu. There's a joke about it, right? There's the man flu, because we're so whiny and we struggle so hard with the pain. But women are, for generations have been certainly emotionally and verbally abused by men. So they, generational trauma and so on. So, how do you measure strength? And I measure it by how in touch you are with your emotions. I think that's impressive. And you can see it a mile away in a man. And that's why I love Jews. Jewish men are distinctly less masculine and distinctly more in touch with their emotions. Now, there's a lot of exceptions that, they're assholes and masculine pricks just like anybody else. I know plenty of them.
It's very funny. I grew up in a Jewish household, and I'm trying to connect all those dots, and I feel like every person in the generation before mine was so broken in some way and not in touch with their emotions that I think we're making progress.
Yes, and no, but
progress.
I know not of your family, and I'm obviously stereotyping about Jewish culture, American Jewish culture especially. Yeah. But you know what I'm saying, right?
Oh, for sure. I am. I'm very in touch with all that stuff, but I feel like the generation before was working on it.
So strike being in touch with your emotions because of the, inherited trauma of Jews, right? It's inherited. It's a science, actually. Generational trauma is a real thing. But like they weren't constantly signaling masculinity. Like when a guy drives by in a pickup truck blowing black smoke, he's not Jewish. I'm just saying.
Right.
Probably right.
Absolutely
when a guy cuts me off with jersey plates and Mercedes, there's a Jew.
That's great. So Pete, as we wrap this up a bit, I'm trying to. We always end on an advice question, and some of our conversations are a little bit more straightforward, meaning, there's a heart transplant surgeon, there's a Navy SEAL, there's a teacher. Like it was a much more direct route in a way. You're very unique, and what you've done is remarkable, incredible, complicated, and you're making a huge difference from my vantage point in the world right now. You have a great voice that you're using. For a young person who wants to carve out a place for themselves and to create a spot within the world of media and to build a brand and to build a personality. If they're just getting started, what advice do you have for somebody who wants to follow some sort of a similar path?
Don't do it.
Yeah.
No money in it. It's brutal. I love mentoring young people and I love answering their questions. But one piece of advice that I give a lot of young people is don't follow your dreams. Quit. Because no one ever tells you that. And here's the thing. Might not be that good at it. You might not be that good at it. I think I wasn't good at a lot of things. So I shifted slightly. I maneuvered this way. I went over here. I did this. I found out where I was good and I pursued that. But I also was so driven and determined and like motivational home oriented that I really think it held me back from pursuing certain other things. I think I would have been a really good journalist or a really good teacher. I'm really great with kids. I've done a lot with young people throughout my career, volunteering and coaching and stuff. But I think that when you're young and you know what you want to do, it's great. But most people don't. And so be patient. Like I've encouraged my daughter, my younger daughter, my older daughter settled on a dream, but my younger daughter is not. And unfortunately, my older daughter is kind of following my footsteps, actor, director, writer, but she's so good already. Like she works so hard. She's like me too. So I don't deny her success. Plus she's beautiful. So fuck her. I hate that phrase. I just fuck her out my daughter, but like screw her. Like she doesn't know what it's like to be ugly in this business. So, screw good looking people in this business. But so, she's got the grit and she's going to do fine. But my younger daughter is super confident and very smart, not quite sure what she wants to do. So I'm encouraging her to take a gap year. Like don't even go to college. Just figure it out. So my encouragement to young people is don't be forced into having a dream. And if you do have a dream, you can adapt it and you can quit anytime. All this don't quit, stay determined type of commencement speeches, which I've sold all of that. I certainly lived it. I think that maybe we need to sometimes, it's okay to give up because you might be way happier over here doing this. You just didn't know that was even a job. You didn't know that was a career path you could take. No one told you that that was a thing you could do. And maybe you should just be working outside in nature the rest of your life and not working, and just, I also tell them money is so misleading. I 100% think a certain amount of money brings you happiness. Absolutely. A certain amount, we could argue it does. But like, I always can't stand these young men, especially saying, I just want to make a lot of money. I'm like, you have no idea about life, bro. All you'll be doing is working, just if you're working all time. I mean, I had so many friends, who were making a lot of money as lawyers, working 10-hour days, and they were miserable. And they got, the like guys that were like grew up that playing sports and played sports in college in really great shape. And now they're working 10 hours a day and they just get mushy and unhealthy. And it's like, what are you doing? When the best thing that happened when I lost my job, which I never would have chosen, but I had 2 hours in a car every day and I got mushy, and I'm pretty exercise oriented, former athlete, personal trainer, all that. So when I lost that job, I got in the best shape of my life. That was 2019. I haven't had a setback. Like, I'm really in the best shape of my life as a result of not having to be in a car. So you don't know what's going to happen when bad things happen, and you can't predict it. But also, we're talking about young people and advice. Be okay with quitting and adapt. There's no shame in it. None at all. You might not be that good. You tried. You didn't like it. People are jerks all the time. They didn't treat you well. And you know what? You have too much dignity to do that. Like, to be a comedian, God forbid you're a female, you want to do it. But to be a comedian, you just have to eat shit. And that's why I don't, put up with executives. Once I got to a certain point, like, I ate all the shit as a comedian. I mean, horrible things were said and done. There's no HR department. One time I had I was sexually harassed, legitimately, like, sexually harassed. The booker of the comedy club was a gay guy. And I was like, can I get a spot this Friday night? He's like, no, but if you show me one of your balls, I'll give you a spot on Tuesday. So I was like, wow, how about both of them for a Wednesday? And he's like, we got a deal. And I showed him my nuts. Man, I didn't care. I wasn't traumatized by it. Like, who gets turned on? All set. But I mean, like, I had to do some really, and that was the kind of the worst kind of thing, but mostly just had to be like shit on by like some asshole cokehead who abuses his family and drives a Corvette. No offense, Dad. So my dad's a big Corvette guy. He's not listening. And so, like, the abuse that I had to take from them, like,
we don't have a lot of big Corvette listeners here.
I didn't want to put up with that. I don't think anybody should have to put up with that for very long. And if you have to put up with that in your business, and maybe it's not worth it. So be prepared to quit and to adapt and change directions. There's zero shame in that. And you will very well may find that the new ways that the new things that you do and the new opportunities that open for you are so much better suited for you than your quote dream ever was.
But you literally just defined the entire theme of our program, No Wrong Choices, aligned with career journeys. I mean, this is what we talk about every time out, that there are no wrong choices. You try stuff, you experiment, you see what you like. And if you do something and it goes terribly wrong, no matter what, you learn something from that experience that you're going to carry forward.
I'm trying to think of all my wrong choices to prove it wrong.
There are no wrong choices.
No, it doesn't prove it wrong, because the point is the wrong choices I made, like smoking pot on Joe Rogan's show and getting really paranoid. Like, I smoke pot regularly, but not his pot, and not on a show, and not on the highest profile show I've ever been on. And I just kind of humiliated myself. And after that, I think I still haven't gone back and listened to it. But the truth is, it wasn't a wrong choice. It was a right. Like, I'm glad that I did that, and I learned to not do that. Like, never go in a high profile. I was trying to appease him and be cool, like with another guy. And it's Joe Rogan. You guys smoke pot with Joe Rogan, and I did. And I was like stoned out of my gourd, and like my mouth dried up. And I got scared, and I was. Hear my voice and my, it wasn't great.
Not great for podcasting, no.
But you learned from the experience, without a doubt.
I did. You're absolutely right. Wrong choices, but no wrong choices.
So, Pete, if people want to check out your podcast, which is great. I listened to with Greg Proops earlier today. Fantastic episode. How do people find you, and where should people look for you?
It's a daily podcast, standupwithpete.com, but you can find it wherever you get your podcast. Just search my name or Stand Up with Pete Dominick, and it drops every night by midnight. And like I said, we got a good stuff segment. Then I got news and clips, and then I got an interview with a real smart, thoughtful person. Proops is actually outside the norm, but he's such a smart, thoughtful guy. He's great for the show. But I mean, usually I talk to journalists and policy experts and academics and authors and scientists and folks like that. But smart people that are good at talking. That's important because there's a lot of really, really smart people who are, maybe even great writers, but you get them on a show and you guys all know it's like, Jesus.
Boring as hell.
Boring. Every other word is and it's just real tough stuff to listen to. And you gotta find the right people and curate them, and even sometimes tell them how to be a little better. Like, do you realize how often you do that?
I think we had Gene Simmons years ago who was a disaster. You guys remember that years ago?
He did not want to be there, boy.
Nope.
No.
And he did not let us know in no small terms.
Nothing worse than a super talented actor in an interview, because you think of them as a talented actor because they're doing someone's script. Now they are left with their own words, and you're like, are you?
They're dull as dirt.
Anything going on at all to share? Like anything that's interesting, or are you comfortable at all in this space right now at talking with people? I can't believe how good looking you are.
Preach.
The better looking a person is, too, the more likely they are to not have charisma, because why did they need it? I said to Anthony Jeselnik, I made this joke. You know him, a very funny comedian.
Yeah.
He's a real good looking guy. And one time we were hanging out at a comedy club, and I just said to him, I was like, it doesn't make any sense to me why you're so funny, because you're also so good looking. Why is such a good looking guy also so funny? And he just stared at me and he goes, well, I have a similar question for you. Why aren't you funnier?
Oh, geez.
But yeah, he nailed it. It was so funny. He's like, my question to you is, why aren't you funnier?
Perfect.
Well, you've proven yourself to us. There's no question about that. Very funny, very charming, very charismatic.
You get a prize.
This is the bit I do on my hangout. We do what do we won? And you literally grab whatever is on your desk in front of you. So whoever has something for me, Larry, what do you have in the space? What have I wanted?
I will send you this mug of coffee.
You get Scotch
immediately.
Tape.
You get a brand new Yeti mug for joining us.
Larry is holding up a comb. What an insult. What am I do with that, you bastard? I once saved a plane from a guy who went crazy. It's my greatest story in life. Me and a couple other guys saved the plane from a guy who was being violent. Yeah. And
no way.
Well, you have
the
to tell
airline, I'll tell it, but if you get time, but the airline after thanked me by sending me a hair care gift bag. And I was like, wow.
That's nice.
I don't have any hair. Thank you. Yeah, no, we were on a plane from Italy, Sicily to New York, and a guy was mentally ill of some sort, and he got up and he started screaming and scared people. He's a big guy.
You sure he just wasn't Italian?
Well,
that's supposed to be a joke.
It could be a joke because he was the better one is you sure he wasn't just Sicilian, because my family is from, and so I can make these jokes. And he was Sicilian, and he was my wife's spoke Sicilian, it's her family, and so she was translating. I'm like, what is that guy doing? Like, he's just babbling, not saying anything. He was acting out, and this old man, stood up and tried to calm him down, this elderly priest, and he threw the guy to the ground. And so when he did that, me and another hero jumped into action and tackled him, and I took my belt off and strapped his ankles to his seat. And then a guy came from the back of the plane out of nowhere, pulled out a syringe and pumped it into the guy like a Valium, which has got to be highly illegal.
Yeah, I would think.
It was like 2005, so like, yeah, it was shortly after 9/11, so nobody was fucking around and nobody cared. Like, let the guy. So then the guy starts like waking up from that, and me and another guy are basically guarding him. And I have my back to him, and he reaches up and he grabs the back of my shirt and pulls hard to like pull me down. But because I do a lot of core work, I stayed strong, and he just ripped my shirt off. So now my shirt is off and I'm fucking ripped, and I'm literally living like John McClane, basically. Die hard.
John McClane was a bit doughy, though.
That's true. I was in better shape than John McClane. And so we knocked him back down, restrained him. Plane lands, police are there, they take him away. And then there I am with my shirt hanging off me, and everybody going, "Thank you for saving us, sir." The dumbest thing was the pilots during the flight invited me and the other guy up to like thank us, and they let us in the cabin. I was like, "Are you the dumbest people?" Open the cabin door. Why did they open the cabin door? I was
They should
like,
have
"What
asked
are
you to fly
doing?"
the plane at that point.
Well, then I just thought it would just, I'm a comedian. I thought it'd be too funny. I'm like, "I'm taking over this plane."
That wouldn't have gone over well. No.
Shirtless.
Yay, motherfucker.
And the dumbest was the person who decided to give you the hair care product. So,
That was not, to be fair, whoever sent that out probably didn't know what I look like.
Probably.
But they did send me a care package of hair care, and it was just really.
That's called irony.
Well, that is what you win today. Larry Shea will send you a comb, which seems to be a perfect follow-on to that story.
Thank you, Larry.
Pete, thank you so much for joining us today.
Pete,
Yeah, don't forget to send us that.
Fun. It was
Don't
real
forget
fun.
to send us that link, though.
Oh yeah, for sure.
To the community.
Yeah, absolutely will. Absolutely will. I'll reply to the email you guys sent. I will.
Thank
You
you.
very much,
Thanks
guys.
for your
Thank
time,
you.
Pete.
So that was Pete Dominick with a remarkable, high energy, and fascinating story. Larry Shea, thank you so much for bringing him to us.
Yeah, imagine he does that every single day. He has to do that.
I've listened to the podcast. I don't know how he does that every day.
Yeah, he's gifted. He's special, and he's a special guy. And I was really excited to hear his journey and get to know him a little bit more because, we are friends, but, we don't hang out socially and things of that nature. So, I enjoy getting to know more about people that I enjoy their company, that I enjoy being around. Pete always just had this great vibe about him. So I think you feel that and it comes across in this interview. I was really struck that of the support of his family. It was, his dad's like, do what you want, love for the rest of your life. Like, no matter what, don't be an accountant. Pretty amazing, the support, right? That he gets right off the bat, and takes advantage of it. Says, I'm going to be a professional comedian. And they foster that growth, taking him to see George Carlin, things like that. And then I'm struck by two other things, really, in this interview. The first of which is advice I don't think we've ever heard before, which is dreams could be adopted to something else. Don't follow your dreams. Quit. You might not be very good at it. I mean, it's true. And he pivoted, right? He was the king of the pivot. If it didn't work over here, be okay with it. Maybe you'll be way happier over here. I thought the way he explained that, I had to listen to it like 6 times because it was so good. So listen back like 6 times. Just keep listening.
Push up our numbers.
The second thing I was really struck by, which is something we don't talk about very often. We've talked about it a little bit in the last couple episodes. That's getting fired. Right? Like what a big deal that is. What an ego blow that is. And I just thought his attitude and his optimism and his stick-to-itiveness is just, it's endearing and it's contagious. And yeah, so listen back to that stuff because Pete really speaks to the truth on all of it.
And the one thing I really took away from this discussion with Pete was he's a hard worker. He's not a grinder. He just respects the work and gets it done. And he did it the right way. He really did work his way up from the bottom to the top to where he is now. And it's amazing, all those years on the road, being away from family, almost being away from being away from the birth of his kid. I mean, that's real dedication. But the one thing you could see that it also did was that it kind of hardened him or it shielded him from being, let's say, overwhelmed by people in power, right? So like when, guys are giving him notes on how to do X, Y, and Z, he's like, whatever. You hired me to do this. This is what I'm going to do. Deal with it. And, it takes a lot of courage to kind of tell your boss at times, screw off. I mean, it ain't easy to do that, right? So, yes. But by doing that, he has been able to forge a path forward that's really, really unique. And look, I hope I gave him an idea about being a bro podcast for the left. I mean, who knows? But he is one of those guys who, if he was going to make a quote-unquote pivot in his show, that would be an area you could pivot to because he is right. We don't have enough of those guys politically on the left who want to, I guess, speak in a bro type of culture as we've seen, as we've seen on the opposite side with the guys like Joe Rogan and others who have done that. But he's probably one of those few voices out there who could probably really, really bring others into the fold. He's super intelligent, really, really cool guy. And the one thing I love about him is that he just treats everybody equally. That's That's one of the.
Yeah, he's genuine.
He's so genuine. Yeah. He's so down to earth. That's really the best. That's really the biggest thing I took away from our conversation.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I think, one of the things that really caught me was, if you want something bad enough, and if you have enough talent to work with, and you're patient and you're willing to do whatever it takes, you can achieve great things. I mean, the fact that Pete was willing to hang in there as long as he did to finally get to the point where he was making a good living is pretty remarkable. I look at the time that I was at Sirius, and things are going okay, and new projects are getting thrown at me all the time, et cetera, and I had a chance. I don't know where it was going to go, but I had a chance. I made a choice. I made a choice to walk away because I didn't want to go through that struggle any longer. And Pete stayed, he pushed through, and he did it, which is just truly remarkable and incredibly impressive. So I want to call that out. And the last thing, I'm always impressed by his depth of knowledge on so many different subjects. I don't know how he prepares for his show and how he becomes so enlightened on so many different subjects, but he's a smart guy who knows his stuff, which is really, really very impressive.
I'll say this, is that, he gets to get a lot of knowledge because he said it himself. I don't know everything, but I like to speak to people who know a lot. And then you get educated that way. That's pretty impressive.
Yep. So with that, Pete, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of No Wrong Choices. For everybody out there who wants to get to know Pete better, his website, standupwithpete.com, and his podcast is called Stand Up. Pete, thank you so much for joining us. On behalf of Tushar Saxena, Larry Shea, and me, Larry Samuels, thank you again for joining this episode of No Wrong Choices. If after listening you've thought of someone who could be a great guest, please let us know by sending us a note via the contact page of our website at nowrongchoices.com. While there, please be sure to check out our blog and explore other great episodes while signing up to become a member of our community. You can also follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Threads, and X. TikTok is up and content has begun rolling out. We'll be back with another episode next week. Before then, always remember, there are no wrong choices on the road to success, only opportunities, because we learn from every experience.